2020 certainly saw its share of destruction and disruption, from losses in life to collapses of entire industries as a result of a global pandemic. As the world went contactless, adoption of remote access technologies saw an unprecedented spike in growth. But making this the new normal wasn't an easy task. Organizations placed a huge amount of trust in these cloud and SaaS providers to ensure their survival and protect their data. For cybersecurity professionals, helping ensure these transitions were done appropriately became a primary effort, and cloud security specialists became one of the most sought-after skill sets in 2020. But what really changed? How did our fears and predictions measure up to reality? And what is our reality as we continue through 2021? I sat down with cybersecurity expert Steve Foret to explore just that.
Hey Steve, thanks for swinging by and chatting with us. I think that it was important for us to look back at 2020 and review kind of where we thought we were going to go versus where we actually ended up. What do you think about, our predictions versus our reality in 2020?
Yeah, I think the interesting piece about the whole thing was the predictions were probably pretty close, right? I think maybe some of the advancements slowed down a little bit because we had to shift gears, but I think from a cybersecurity perspective, we didn't have to create anything new, right? So I felt like everything in 2020, from an attack perspective, there was a lot of different types of attacks, but the reality is, from a cyber side, we scaled and technology scaled pretty well to address the massive shift.
So what you're saying is we didn't really see any, super cutting edge attacks. We also didn't see any super cutting edge advancements. We just saw a shift in how we did things and started leveraging technologies that already existed even more in order to kind of accommodate this social distance.
Yeah, I think when you look back through the business enterprises in the past 12 months, there's been a lot of different types of compromises, and everyone can read the news and walk through them all, but the reality is those attacks are the same attacks that always exist. So the neat aspect of it is we've from a workforce, we've been able to scale effectively to work from home. Everybody's wanted to do that for years anyway, so this is a great accelerator, which is, if you're looking for a silver lining in all of this, is
sure
that every business realized they had to be able to do this, support this, and do it securely, and it, I won't say seamlessly, there's almost no such thing as that, but the reality is it scaled pretty well. Right?
What about like identity management? And I know we talked a lot about this concept of a synthetic identity being the increased risk in 2020. How do you think we stacked up there?
Man, yeah. So looking back through some of the predictions around cloud jacking and synthetic identities, right? So they go hand in hand. With the enablement of remote work and remote technology, also enabled the ability for the attackers to do the same thing. So taking over cloud enterprises or cloud infrastructure to do phishing and malicious redirects and all the cool, fun things they do to, well, I shouldn't say fun, but the things they do to make their life easier, the things that we're doing to make our lives easier as well. Right. So from that side, it's been, again, synthetic IDs are what, it's not a new concept, but it's a new application. I don't even know if it's a new application, it's just been easier automated at this point because of the scalability.
I mean, any other predictions that you think we either hit or completely missed the mark on?
Yeah, I think the biggest one that was very apparent with the intrusions this year was really the software development life cycle. The whole supply chain, use of third parties, that whole mechanism is one of the more complex pieces of how business and security work together. So when you look through SolarWinds, for instance, the software development piece, all the medical device stuff, there's software components, there's a heavy opportunity for attackers to inject themselves into many different use cases in the development process, whether you're developing your software, whether you have a vendor developing it, whether it's open or closed, whether you get compiled or non-compiled code, whether you have the opportunity to do an assurance analysis of that, all the free and open software solutions. all these mechanisms are ripe for opportunity to inject themselves, right? And SolarWinds was a great example of that happening. And the biggest challenge right now is there are so many environments that are heavy legacy and on-prem that they're trying to hybrid shift. But that hybrid shift is actually generating many opportunities to inject more code that maybe isn't visible and people don't see because of the amount of vendors and contractors involved and the amount of developers who are maybe hard to see what they're doing and how the code's protected up to the release process. So there's, from that side, that whole malicious software injection into so many layers of that software and supply chain. It's heavy, right? It's not just my code, but it's someone else's code. It's a mobile application that can read my mobile app code. Like, all these mechanisms are out there. And that's definitely been a big thing this year. And it's been a big thing overall, right? So these aren't, I think the most interesting thing was that most of the things that have been happening, they're not new, they're just reapplied. And that's the biggest, for me, that's one of the bigger concerns is we're still not learning, we're still not doing the basics.
So obviously this wouldn't be a SEVNX show without asking you for 7 of something. So if it really is the case that we're missing kind of some of these core, fundamental, basic, elementary, whatever you want to call it, steps, so what would be your 7-step action plan to kind of get yourself back on track?
Oh man, 7 steps to fix all of this. So that's going to be impressive, by the way. It's going to be a good list. It's going to have to be.
It has to be. Make it work.
Oh man. So the first one is, and I'll probably say things in a different way, but like enumerate the attack surface, discover systems, services, and identities, and how the defensives support that. It's a huge step, right? What the heck does that mean? It means you got to find your stuff, you got to be organized, you got to know how your technologies are actually generating visibility to it. The second step is you need to really develop threat maps and scenarios and how those defenses can mitigate those threats. What does that mean? That means a lot more discussion about how the tools work, how the controls are being applied, what kind of threats can actually be actualized on these technologies you have. Like it's a lot of homework, especially knowing that there's such a heavy shift to the left. With heavy shift to the left requires a lot more organization, a lot more thought, a lot more front end. Are we designing this right? So the heavy focus on that. So then the third one, which is the one where I'll have a bunch buried in it because I don't know how we get 7, but prioritize, remediate high risk scenarios, enhance visibility, and basically bolster your defenses. And that means, this is where it gets nuts, because there's just so much. So you really have to be in lockstep with enabling your business. So a lot of use cases that I've seen as business has had to accelerate their needs without IT. And those citizens themselves are having to deploy solutions. So there's a lot more collaboration that needs to be embedded to enable them in doing things the right way.
Okay.
Understanding the SASE capability. So what kind of endpoints? Everyone's remote now, so making sure that is truly locked down and secure, and you have good understanding of who's coming in. The third is having the visibility with the advanced threats and EDR. Like, you need to have the ability to see what's going on in an effective way, and automate as much as you can in all that activities. And then we already talked about it before, but secure the code development process, right? How do you secure that process? You can't have any of these discussions without talking about privileged identities. So have a multi-factor, one-time passwords, admin gateways, all these kind of technologies, and you need to be part of that remediation tactic if you don't have it. And then the last one is just discovering dark data within that remediation list, right? So there are many environments I've worked in where they have had dark data exposed because they didn't realize it was actually exposable.
What is dark data?
It's basically unstructured information in an entity that they don't know it's there. They've maybe lost sight of it. Maybe they opened up to an API on the internet and no one really knows it's actually available. I will say that I think GDPR and CCPA have really made it a hot topic because they don't want random data being exposed. And the onus is back on the business teams and the technology groups to say, do you know where your information is? And are you doing your diligence to make sure it's not there?
Sure.
It's really, at least from my perspective, it's becoming a hotter topic. And that's why it's in this remediation list. How do you make sure you're not leaving an entire database just sitting there with all of your customer records.
Right.
How are you keeping that under control? Are you free creds to it, like no creds, like no passwords, like you don't know, right? So that's dark data, at least
Gotcha.
my perspective on it.
So 7 steps might be a little overzealous.
Well, that was step 3. We got 4 more, and they're not too bad. I don't think they're too bad. The 4th one is like you've done all this work, right? So you've remediated a lot. Is you need to start testing the scenarios again, and then recreate new scenarios, and then basically understand your time to detect, time to alert, how the escalations occur, how they all work together to the workflows. That's 4, right? How do you make it mature? And then 5 is how do you, well, I shouldn't say how do you, it's more create your lessons learned. You've been doing 1, 2, 3, and 4. You've done a ton of work at this point. How do you embed the learning cycle? How do you iterate through your threat maps? How do you amp up your defensibility, like leveraging tools like MITRE and 853? They're really lock stock of like the way to think about it. And then I'm not gonna brand or throw out other tools out there, but there's some really cool tools that can help support that information for you while you're doing your testing. And that is where all the automation kicks back in, where you can get a real tangible sense of, can we stop this? Can we stop that? Are we actually seeing this? Are we seeing that? I don't know. And if you don't know, that's a lesson learned. Like you need to now understand how to get that information. And then 6 is incorporating all of this knowledge you've embedded into the SOC and IR and the SOAR processes, right? So everything in security should be a process. If it's not a process, you should ask why it's not a process. And then the last one is my cheat, which is like a whole bunch of stuff. So I've already done that twice. So baseline, automate, patch, and measure. So baseline what you got, automate as much as you can, patch, because that's one of the easiest things to do, even though it's the hardest. And then measure your progress, right? That's the last step.
Okay, all right.
It's probably 50 steps in 7, but I think I made it work.
All right. High level outline, detailed bullet points. Got it.
All right.
I see
the details.
Thank you. Appreciate you swinging by and bestowing some knowledge upon us.
Happy to do it.
Thanks, man.